Hello and welcome to Sanctuary's weekly Tao Discussions podcast. This is a new space where Eric and I are going to be diving into our primary text, the Tao Te Ching, and the many translations that there are of it. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. Eric, you're the one that really led to the choosing of this text for our church, Sanctuary. Would you be up to share a little more about why you chose it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, in my 20s, when I really began exploring spirituality generally, I grew up very spiritually minded, but it was always confined to the Catholic perspective. And in my 20s, when I left Catholic Church, I started to explore different expressions. That was right around the same time that I started exploring psychedelics. And the Tao Te Ching just absolutely spoke to me as the psychedelic spiritual manual. Mainly because the very first line of the Tao Te Ching says, whatever we're talking about, we don't actually know what it is. As soon as we start putting words to it, it gets further away from its truest essence. And that's so much of what is related to in the psychedelic experience. Those of you who have worked with psilocybin or sacred mushrooms, as we call them within Sanctuary, you know that the ineffable nature of the experience is central to the experience itself. It's just something that you have to, I want to say touch, but it's also not touchable. So yeah, it's a treatise on paradox is how I interpret the Tao Te Ching. And like I said, it is the most, well, you didn't say this, it has very many interpreted versions. It's actually the most interpreted spiritual text. It has more interpretations than any other spiritual text. It's often attributed to this individual Laozu, who has a mysterious story, but the truth is it wasn't written by any one person. Laozu, come to find out, is really it's more of a title for, I think, wise one is how it really translates. It's just an interesting little side note for those of you who don't know. The legend is that Laozu was a scribe within the kingdom, and he had all this wisdom, and when he was retiring and going to go off into the mountains and be a hermit, the people were begging him to write down his wisdom. Please write down your wisdom. And he sat down and wrote these 81 verses and rode off backwards into the sunset on a buffalo. That's
Gosh, he didn't even spell check. It was just like, that's
the backwards on the buffalo part is like, what's that all about? I think there's a metaphor that we can explore probably as time goes on. So
just literal, just straight up literal history.
Backwards on a buffalo. I guess the way that I immediately, I've thought about this a lot, but when the lights are on and you're under pressure, you think about things maybe a little differently. And I guess the way that I have interpreted that is that, the Tao, as we talk about it, or as the text talks about it, is kind of like the path leading the way rather than us carving the path. And if you ride off backwards on a buffalo, well, the buffalo is choosing the direction, not the person on the buffalo. So maybe that's some relevance there. Anyway, we're going to be exploring all 81 chapters of the Tao Te Ching. We do this every Sunday on our Sunday service, or we read them. We don't often go into great depth because we have other texts that are maybe a little more prescient to the time and place where we're in. But this is such a powerful text in terms of just broadly interpreting life experience. And so our members have asked quite a bit for us to find a way to explore this a little deeper, and this is how we've decided to do so. So at least for the time being, we would love for you to be a part of the conversation. So the interpretations and the considerations that we provide, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. What are your thoughts on the specific chapter, on maybe what we're thinking and speaking to, or the text itself?
So shall we dive into Chapter 1 of the Tao Te Ching? This translation right here is by John C. Wu. And let's get right into it. Tao can be talked about, but not the eternal Tao. Names can be named, but not the eternal name. As the origin of heaven and earth, it is nameless. As the mother of all things, it is nameable. So, as ever hidden, we should look at its inner essence. As always manifest, we should look at its outer aspects. These two flow from the same source, though differently named, and both are called mysteries. The mystery of mysteries is the door of all essence.
What you got?
So how do you talk about something that can't be talked about?
Well, that's our conundrum.
That's where the fun is.
Yeah.
So similar to the mushroom space. So, okay, so maybe we break this into chunks here. I mean, what stands out to you the most out of that first introductory chapter of Laozu's wisdom?
I think what stands out to me is that as the source of the universe, basically it cannot be named, but as the mother of all things, it can be named. And here's where we start to see some real distinction from standard Western interpretations of spirituality, because rather than, it speaks first from the feminine, from the moment it speaks to the visible, it speaks to the feminine rather than the masculine, right? Because we talk about God as the father of all things is a pretty common, something's pretty commonly said in Western Christian traditions. And here, the very first chapter speaks of the mother of all things, which to me lands a little more realistic, right? So I don't want to go too far.
Now,
what are your thoughts? Yeah.
And that's also dependent on the person translating it, because there's so many different translations.
Yeah, I don't think...
And like this one that I'm looking at by Stephen Mitchell doesn't
even
name
talk about a
father or a mother.
Right.
So it's helpful to explore.
This one here is
Different
the source of
translations.
all things, expressing itself as the mother of all created things. So while you're 100% right, so the person that translates it actually does matter considerably. John C. Wu, his translation, the reason I have kind of clung to that one over the years is because he has been considered, like he just by the name, he's Chinese, right? Which is the origin of the Tao Te Ching. Stephen Mitchell is a Western scholar. So his translation is a little more linguistically accessible to Westerners, whereas as we read through John C. Wu's, it has considerably more abstract language, and it speaks more in the metaphorical, philosophical terms than like Stephen Mitchell's. This one here coming from, who's this one? I forget this one.
Sam Tarode.
Yeah, Sam Tarode. This one is, I don't want to call it dumbed down, but it kind of is. It's overly simplified in my perspective. Like I like things to be complicated, I guess. I don't know. Like it's just like
Nice
it's
to have
like
both.
Well, it's poetic metaphorical language. I don't prefer it anyway. I'm not to say it should be one way or the other, but my preference is for it to leave more to the imagination, whereas Tarode's is much more of like literal. Stephen Mitchell's I find to be much more literal, philosophical, analytical, like a Western, whereas John C. Wu's, personally, I have found it to be a really healthy mixture of that Western philosophy and kind of Eastern abstractionism, if that makes sense at all.
Okay, so pick your potion.
Yeah.
What do you...
Yeah. There's like hundreds of...
Know thyself.
There's hundreds
what
of
you like?
varieties of Tao Te Ching. So yeah, pick which one you like.
What has been expansive, what is expansive for me about this first chapter, as with so many chapters of the Tao Te Ching, is naming the paradox, the both and, there's the inner and the outer, not heavily focusing on or only focusing on one type of experience, acknowledging that we are having a human experience, and yet we are in a spiritual realm, at the same time. There's both. And so when it says, so as ever hidden, we should look at its inner essence. As always manifest, we should look at its outer aspects. That's also cluing me in to that we are a part of this mother of all things. Like, it's not separate from us, is what that says to me as well.
I love that.
Which can be really empowering. So that brings me to exploring practically how to apply this. How does this apply to our personal lives? So sitting with this first chapter, if you were to reflect on the last week, personally, it's been an interesting week. We're snowed in here in Kentucky with our kids. And as we're doing this, we're inviting you to do this as well with your own personal life as an opportunity for reflection. What comes up for you thinking about this last week and this, the teaching of this chapter?
Well, over the last week, I have been newly acquainted with Federico Faggin. He is a philosopher, physicist who has been exploring human beings as he's been exploring free will and consciousness from the interpretation of humans as fields, first and foremost. And so there's a beautiful kind of scientific, philosophical thread that we could follow here. I won't take the time to do that. I highly suggest, if you're interested in that topic, to search Federico Faggin. Gosh.
Maybe we'll link it in the notes.
Friggin' hard name to say for this country boy. Yeah, good idea. And anyway, and the conversation about matter emanating from non-matter. All right, so consciousness and free will, as he interprets it mathematically, exists not in the physical plane. That consciousness and free will, the free will part's really interesting, exist from the field state, and it then takes form in the form of humans and other types of matter. And so it really feeds pretty well into some of the studies I've been working on, and which those studies then relate to my daily life, because everything that I experience, I have a tendency, as most of us do, to perceive it as good or bad, right? But if I can go back to that understanding that everything I'm experiencing is an emanation of consciousness, then it's not really good or bad. It's just something for me to experience and learn from or grow from. So, yeah, it's been actually pretty present in my reflections and life experience this last week. I mean, we went sledding. That is something that came at, like, that is the mystery revealed. Eric does not go out in the snow. Like, the mystery became manifest because I went sledding.
So now Eric does go out in the
does,
snow, and
right?
Eric has fun in the snow.
I had more fun than the Ice Queen.
Yeah, my back is sore right now, actually. Yeah, that's so touching on the last line here. The mystery of mysteries is the door of all essence. Similarly, for me in this last week, so it has me reflecting on 1 year ago and the cycles of life, the opportunities that we're cyclically presented with, and the opportunities to level up each time, if you will. And so this last week, we had plans, we had work plans, we had projects, we had a whole vision of what it was going to be like. And surprise, snowed in, school's canceled for our small children. And it felt like we were living in a bit of a liminal space because we didn't know how long every day, we didn't know how long school would be canceled for. Is it going to be open the next day? I don't know. Are we going to be able to move forward with our projects and our timelines and all of our human expectations, or are we going to be in the unknown, and for how much longer? And a year ago when this happened, I found myself labeling it. This isn't good. This isn't good. Oh no. Why is this happening? Why is this happening to us? This is creating suffering for us. That was my story last year. I mean, in and out, not all together, but like overall. When I reflect back on it, that's how it felt.
Yeah. I remember.
It was pretty miserable.
I was right there with you.
And as we've grown a lot, I've grown a lot in the last year in different ways, and it felt easier for me with this more embodied understanding that all is coming from this source. And like logically, I mean, I've like logically known that for many years. However, training my nervous system, my energy, my being, my field, as you touched on, through repeated knowing of that, there's something that's different. That was different for me this last week.
Can I also just ask for you to speak to or relate to practices and perspectives that have assisted with that? You know, I think it's valuable anyway for those who aren't familiar with Sanctuary to point out that Sanctuary is not a Taoist church, right? We are open to all kinds of peace-loving perspectives. The Tao Te Ching is just a really powerful and concise text that is just simple. It's just timeless wisdom that can be applied across cultures. But as you're speaking about the growth that you've experienced and this kind of person coming forth, the person that you did not know was there coming forth, right? It has me reflecting on the Kabbalistic practices and conversations that we've been having. And I don't know if it helpful not to speak directly to Kabbalah and how that's been kind of formative in you becoming a new person, but more so just like the practices that have helped you transform, because transformation does not just come out of nowhere. I mean, it does, or it comes out of the mystery, but there are steps, processes, thoughts, ways of being that help to bring that mystery into being. So I would just love to hear you talk a little bit about some of what's happened over the last year, or some of what you've done over the last year to become this version of you that wasn't there previously.
Wow. What a great question. There's been a compiling of practices for me. First, what comes to mind is authentic relating practices. I went through 4 authentic relating trainings over the last 2 years. And the foundation of those trainings is through a series of practices allowing, like welcoming the moment, welcoming the unfolding moment, and learning how to build skills to not react, to instead of react, to respond consciously in service of connection in relationships. And I see relationships as everything. We have a relationship with there's relationships woven through every category of our life. Relationship with ourself, first and foremost, and the creator or the source or God or something greater, mystical, that's running through everything. We have a relationship with that. We have relationships with everyone in our household, in our workplace. And as this first chapter of the Tao is talking about, there's this inner essence and then this manifest outer essence, and there's an interface. And so there's been a lot of intentional practice for me in looking at how I'm interacting with my inner experience outwardly with others, and looking at how I can engage in a more conscientious way that's less reactive, more conscious in all kinds of ways. So that's one thing. Authentic relating is huge, and that's a big part of our community at Psanctuary. We have community agreements that we've introduced in the last year, really directly in everything that we do. So we come back to these different practices that are in service to connection in our community, to maintain that connection and also be authentic within ourselves. And then Kabbalah has been just huge. And such a big part of the Kabbalah 1 teachings are, to me, my biggest takeaway is prayer. The way that I see prayer now is so different than how I did a couple of years ago. I used to think praying was like begging for things outside of me to change, kind of like giving up my power to something outside of me and saying, okay, whoever you are outside of me, that's big and great and better than me, go ahead and change my life, please. I'm done with this. I give up. It's all on you now. I've got no responsibility. That's how I used to see it. Kabbalah, starting to study Kabbalah, has shown me a different way, that prayer is way more effectively used as a technology for inner strength and inner guidance from within. Starting from, first and foremost, we are always connected with Source. We are an emanation of Source consciousness, not something separate from it. So we have a lot more power than we think. So between those things, my life has just transformed in the last year or two.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So what do you think about walking away with this chapter? Like, if we're to utilize this first chapter of the Tao Te Ching as an inspiration for us over the next week, what for you is a practice that's helped you, or something that we could leave you all listening with?
Well, for me, this chapter is all about awe. It's about wonder. And my experience with spirituality and religion in particular is that we've lost that. We talk about God and we talk about prayer again as this kind of like, God help me, or who's the power out there that's in control. And like, you know, the overarching theme, I feel like, of the Tao Te Ching is this bigger concept in Taoism. It's called Wu Wei, and that's action through inaction. And like the universe, the planets spinning are such an excellent example. The trees growing, to me, is such an excellent example of this mystery of mysteries becoming manifest without any effort. Like, and I take that, I do my best, or I do my best to do my best to apply to apply this on pretty much every level of understanding. When I look at the political world or the social world and I see just what seems like absolute insanity, I still am typically able to apply this perspective that whatever is happening it's emanating from a source that I have no comprehension of, and the wisdom behind even the things that seem tumultuous, even our children being out of school, It's the same glory and majesty and mystery that creates mountains and chasms and oceans full of every kind of colorful fish and mysterious mushrooms that have molecules of consciousness that help us understand our world and our experience on levels that we can't even put into words. Like that mystery that is spoken of in this chapter is present, is ever present in everything. And so the first chapter of the Tao Te Ching for me is all about awe and wonder.
I love that. So for you listening, what's an experience that, even if it's so small, like that, like grating whining of your toddler, or
I'm talking from experience over here.
That's not coming from us, just, me psychically intuiting.
Children, when you grow up and watch this, you'll understand.
Or the person in your workplace who's like getting on your nerves, or the being in traffic and it just seems like it's taking way longer to get home. Like what is the thing that for you is coming up that you could ease in with a little more awe and wonder with, knowing that just maybe it's a part of this mysterious unfolding that we're in?
It'll change the perspective.
Would love to bring you into this conversation in our community. If you're still here and you enjoyed this conversation, head to psanctuary.org and sign up for our newsletter. You'll be notified of Sunday services. That's an awesome place to get in on these conversations. We'd love to have your contributions where we explore the Tao Te Ching every single week and other texts like that Italian
Federico,
something
friggin'
or other.
Friggin' Federico.
That maybe
friggin' Federico, man, this guy.
Yeah, so get in on the conversation. Let's explore together. Find all the links you need in the show notes, and we hope to see you next week for the next exploration.